Finish her, she's already weak, my husband told my doctor, thinking I was asleep. But he didn't see my eyes crack open just enough to catch the cold look they shared. The machines around my hospital bed beeped softly while my heart hammered so loud I was sure they could hear it. My name is Simone, and 3 days ago I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. I had a loving husband of 8 years, a successful catering business, and we were finally trying for the baby we'd always dreamed of. Then I collapsed at my restaurant during the dinner rush. The doctor said it was exhaustion, maybe stress. Nothing serious, they promised. Just rest. But now, lying here in this sterile room with tubes in my arms, I heard words that made my blood turn to ice. The medication should do it, Dr. Patterson whispered back to my husband Gerald. No one will suspect anything. Heart failure from the stress of her condition. My condition? What condition? I'd been feeling tired lately, sure, but nothing that would explain. Whatever this was. Gerald moved closer to my bed and I forced my breathing to stay even. Through my barely open eyes, I watched this man I'd shared a bed with for nearly a decade lean over me like I was already dead. His face held no love, no concern. Just cold calculation. How long? Gerald asked. 24 hours, maybe less. The insurance money will come through clean. No questions. Insurance money. My life insurance policy. The one Gerald had insisted we increase last year, for security. The one that would pay out $2 million if I died from natural causes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and confront them both. But something deep inside told me to stay still, to listen, to learn everything I could. My grandmother used to say, "Baby, sometimes you got to play dead to stay alive." I never understood what she meant until this moment. Dr. Patterson checked his watch. I'll increase the dosage in an hour. By tomorrow morning, it'll all be over. They were poisoning me. My own husband and my doctor were slowly killing me, and they thought I was too weak, too trusting to notice. They thought I was just another naive woman who believed everything the men in her life told her. They were wrong. After they left, I lay there for what felt like hours, my mind racing. Every loving word Gerald had spoken, every gentle touch, every time he'd brought me soup when I was sick, had it all been an act? When had my husband decided I was worth more dead than alive? The nurse came in around midnight to check my for. Her name tag read Brenda, and she moved with a kind of gentle efficiency that comes from years of caring for people. She was a black woman about my mother's age, with kind eyes and steady hands. "How you feeling, honey?" she asked, adjusting my blanket. I wanted to tell her everything, but how could I? Who would believe such a crazy story? Instead, I whispered, "Thirsty." "Let me get you some water," she said, but as she reached for the pitcher, I grabbed her wrist. "Not from there," I said, my voice barely audible. "Please. Just from the tap." She looked at me strangely, but something in my eyes must have told her I was serious. She filled a fresh cup from the bathroom sink and helped me drink. "Brenda," I whispered as she prepared to leave. "If something happens to me, if I don't make it, will you remember that I was alert tonight? That I could think clearly?" Her face grew concerned. "Child, what are you talking about? You're going to be fine." "Promise me," I said, gripping her hand tighter than I should have been able to. "Promise me you'll remember." She nodded slowly, and I saw understanding dawn in her eyes. Nurses see everything in a hospital. They know when something isn't right. After she left, I forced myself to think clearly. I couldn't drink anything they gave me. I couldn't eat their food. I had to find a way to get help without them knowing I was suspicious. My phone. Gerald had brought it from home, but I hadn't touched it since I'd been here. I reached for the bedside table, my arms feeling like lead weights. Every movement was an effort, but I managed to grab the phone and hide it under my blanket. My best friend Denise's number was still in my favorites. We'd been friends since high school, through everything. She was a paralegal now, smart and tough. If anyone would believe me and know what to do, it would be her. But I couldn't call her. Not yet. If they were monitoring my phone, a sudden call to my best friend might tip them off. I needed to be smarter than that. I thought about my life, about how I'd gotten here. Gerald and I had met at a church fundraiser. He was charming, successful, everything my mother had hoped I'd find. He ran his own consulting business and always had money. Maybe too much money. I'd never questioned where it all came from. Our wedding had been beautiful. 200 people at the country club, flowers everywhere, my dress custom made. Gerald had insisted on the best of everything. "Nothing's too good for my queen," he used to say. Now those words made me sick. When had things changed? When had I become worth more to him dead than alive? Was it when my catering business started really taking off last year? Was it when I inherited my grandmother's house? Or had this always been his plan? I remembered how insistent he'd been about me seeing Dr. Patterson specifically. "He's the best," Gerald had said. "My business partner's wife sees him." Business partner. I'd never met any business partner. The machines around me continued their steady beeping. Each beep meant I was still alive, still fighting. But I could feel whatever they were giving me working through my system, making me weaker, cloudier. I had to act fast. I thought about my grandmother, who'd raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She'd been the strongest woman I knew, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table and me in school. "Simone," she used to tell me, "you got steel in your spine just like your great-grandmother. She survived things that would break other people, and so will you." My great-grandmother had been born in 1920 in rural Alabama. She'd lived through segregation, through times when a black woman had no rights and no voice. But she'd survived, and she'd made sure her family survived too. That same blood ran through my veins. I wasn't going to die in this hospital bed. I wasn't going to let Gerald collect his insurance money and move on to his next victim. I was going to fight. But first I needed proof. I needed evidence that would hold up in court and put both Gerald and Dr. Patterson behind bars where they belonged. I looked around the room, taking inventory. The floor bag hanging next to my bed. That had to be where the poison was. If I could somehow get a sample of what they were giving me, maybe Denise could have it tested. The bathroom was only 10 feet away, but it might as well have been 10 miles. I'd been telling everyone I was too weak to walk, and they expected me to stay in bed. But late at night, when the halls were quiet, maybe I could move around without being noticed. I waited until the sounds in the hallway died down. Around 2 in the morning, I slowly pulled the 4 needle from my arm, wincing as a small drop of blood appeared. I'd have to be quick. They'd notice if the machine started beeping alarms. Moving carefully, I made it to the bathroom and found a small disposable cup. Using the 4 tube, I managed to collect a few drops of the fluid that had been going into my bloodstream. It looked like normal saline, but I knew it had to contain something else. Something that was slowly shutting down my organs. I hid the cup in my purse, then carefully reinserted the 4 needle. A small bandage from the bathroom covered the tiny wound, and I was back in bed just as a different nurse walked by in the hallway. My heart was pounding from the effort, but I'd done it. I had evidence. Now I just had to live long enough to use it. As dawn approached, I heard Gerald's voice in the hallway. He was early, visiting hours didn't start until 8. But I guess when you're plotting with the doctor, normal rules don't apply. "How is she?" I heard him ask Dr. Patterson. "Weaker. It won't be long now." They entered my room together, and I forced my body to go limp, my breathing to become shallow and labored. Gerald sat in the chair beside my bed and took my hand. His touch made my skin crawl. "I'm here, baby," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." The lies came so easily to him. How many other women had he done this to? Was I his first victim or just the latest? Dr. Patterson checked my chart and adjusted something on the 4 machine. "I'm increasing the medication," he told Gerald. "She should be more comfortable now." More comfortable. That was one way to put it. After they left, I knew I was running out of time. Whatever they'd just given me was stronger than before. I could feel it pulling me toward darkness, making my thoughts fuzzy and my limbs heavy. I had maybe hours left. If I was going to save myself, it had to be now. Using every ounce of strength I had left, I reached for my phone again. But this time I didn't call Denise. Instead, I opened the voice memo app and began to record everything I'd heard, everything I'd seen, everything I knew. My voice was weak and shaky, but it was clear enough. I described Gerald's conversation with Dr. Patterson, the insurance policy, the way they talked about me like I was already dead. I talked about the sample I'd taken and where I'd hidden it. When I finished recording, I sent the file to Denise along with a text message. "Emergency. Life or death. Don't call or come here. Just listen to this and call Detective Rodriguez at the police station. Tell him about the insurance policy and Gerald's business partner. I love you." Then I deleted all evidence of the message from my phone and slipped it back onto the bedside table. The darkness was closing in now, but I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. I'd fought back. I'd given myself a chance. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going down without a fight. As I drifted off, I heard my grandmother's voice in my head. "Steel in your spine, baby girl. Steel in your spine." The next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the hospital window. I was still alive, which was more than Gerald and Dr. Patterson had planned. My body felt heavy like I was swimming through thick honey, but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. Brenda was checking my vitals, her face creased with concern. When she saw my eyes open, she leaned closer. "How you feeling this morning, honey?" "Still here," I whispered, and she smiled. Yes, you are. And that's something. I could hear the unspoken understanding in her voice. She knew something wasn't right. During her shift, she'd probably seen my husband and doctor whispering together, noticed things that didn't add up. My friend, I said quietly. Denise, has she called? Brenda shook her head. No calls for you today. But visiting hours just started. That was good. Denise was smart enough to know not to tip them off by calling the hospital directly. She'd gotten my message and was hopefully taking action. Gerald arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying a bouquet of yellow roses, my favorite flowers. The sight of them made me want to throw up. How many times had he brought me flowers over the years? How many of those times had he been planning my death? Good morning, beautiful, he said, kissing my forehead. His lips felt like ice against my skin. Gerald, I managed to say, making my voice weak and grateful. You came. Of course I came. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. He sat down and took my hand, stroking it gently. Dr. Patterson says you had a rough night. Liar. Dr. Patterson had expected me to be dead by morning. I feel strange, I said, which wasn't entirely acting. The medication was making everything feel distant and unreal. Like I'm floating away. Gerald squeezed my hand tighter. Just rest, baby. Everything's going to be okay. His words were supposed to be comforting, but I heard the truth underneath them. Everything was going to be okay, for him. Once I was gone, he'd be a grieving widower with $2 million and no one to answer to. Dr. Patterson came in during Gerald's visit, and I watched them carefully. They were comfortable with each other like they'd done this before. How many other women had they killed together? How long had this partnership been going on? Mrs. Crawford, Dr. Patterson said, checking my chart. I'm going to adjust your medication again. You need stronger treatment to fight this infection. Infection. That was a new lie. Yesterday it had been exhaustion and stress. Today it was an infection. Tomorrow, if I lived that long, it would probably be something else. What kind of infection? I asked, making my voice sound worried but trusting. It's complicated, he said dismissively. Nothing you need to worry about. We're taking good care of you. They were taking care of me all right. Taking care to kill me slowly and quietly. After they left together, probably to discuss how much more poison they needed to finish the job, I lay still and listened. The hospital was busy during the day with nurses coming and going, other patients' families in the hallways. If Denise had contacted the police, they couldn't act yet. They'd need evidence, a plan. They'd have to be careful. Around noon, a new face appeared in my doorway. A young black man in scrubs, maybe 25, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Crawford? I'm Jerome, one of the lab technicians. I need to draw some blood for additional tests. This wasn't part of their plan. Gerald and Dr. Patterson wouldn't order tests that might show what was really in my system. This had to be someone else. As Jerome prepared the needle, he leaned close and whispered, "Your friend Denise says to tell you that backup is coming. Stay strong." My heart leaped, but I kept my face neutral. Denise had gotten my message. Help was on the way. Jerome drew several vials of blood, more than seemed necessary for routine tests. "We'll have these results back soon," he said loudly enough for anyone listening to hear. Then quietly, "Evidence. Hold on just a little longer." After he left, I felt stronger than I had since this nightmare began. I wasn't alone. People were fighting for me, working to expose Gerald and Dr. Patterson before they could finish what they'd started. But I also knew I was running out of time. Whatever they were giving me was accumulating in my system, shutting down my organs bit by bit. I could feel my body struggling, my heartbeat irregular, my breathing shallow. I had to do more than just survive. I had to help build the case against them. That afternoon, when Gerald came back for his evening visit, I was ready. "Honey," I said weakly, "I've been thinking about our life together, about the future we planned." He leaned forward, playing the concerned husband perfectly. "Don't talk like that. You're going to get better." "But what if I don't?" I let tears gather in my eyes. "What if something happens to me? Will you be okay?" "Simone, don't." "The life insurance policy," I continued. "The one we increased last year. At least I know you'll be taken care of." His eyes flickered with something, greed, anticipation, before he covered it with fake sorrow. "I don't care about money. I just want you to get well." $2 million, I said, watching his face carefully. It seemed like so much when we signed the papers. Now I'm grateful we did. "Stop talking like this," he said, but I could see him calculating in his head. $2 million. Enough to start over somewhere else, maybe with someone new. "Promise me something," I said, gripping his hand with what little strength I had. Promise me you'll use some of that money to help other people. Maybe donate to the hospital or start a scholarship fund. Gerald nodded, but his smile was tight. Of course, baby. Whatever you want. He had no intention of helping anyone. He'd take the money and disappear, probably to another city where he could find his next victim. That evening, as Gerald prepared to leave, Dr. Patterson stopped by for a routine check. I pretended to be asleep and listened to them talk in low voices near the door. She's lasting longer than expected, Dr. Patterson said. Is that a problem? Not necessarily. But we may need to increase the dosage again. We can't let this drag on too long, or people might start asking questions. What kind of questions? Her friend has been calling around, asking about visiting hours and her condition. The nursing staff is starting to notice how often you're here after hours. Gerald cursed under his breath. Denise always was too nosy for her own good. We finish this tonight, Dr. Patterson said. I'll give her enough to stop her heart within the hour. It'll look like her system finally gave out. What about an autopsy? Heart failure from infection and exhaustion. It'll be clean. After they left, I knew this was it. I had maybe an hour before they came back to kill me. An hour to somehow save my own life. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers and sent another message to Denise. Tonight. 1 hour. They're finishing it. Jerome has blood samples. I love you all. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was a little girl sitting in my grandmother's church. I prayed. I prayed for strength, for justice, for the chance to see Gerald and Dr. Patterson pay for what they'd done. I prayed for time. 30 minutes later, Brenda came in for what she probably thought was a final check. When she saw I was awake, she sat down beside my bed. Honey, she said quietly, I need you to know that some people are looking out for you. People who care about what happens. I know, I whispered. Thank you. Your grandmother would be proud of you, she said, and I looked at her in surprise. Yes, I knew Mama Rose. She was a fighter just like you're being now. Tears ran down my cheeks. My grandmother had been known as Mama Rose to everyone in the neighborhood. She'd been a force of nature, standing up to landlords and bullies and anyone who tried to hurt the people she loved. She used to say that sometimes the good Lord puts you in impossible situations to see what you're made of, Brenda continued. I think she'd say you're made of the right stuff. 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Gerald and Dr. Patterson were coming back, probably with enough poison to finish me off. My heart rate spiked and the monitors around my bed began beeping faster. This was it. Either help was coming or I was about to die. The footsteps stopped outside my door and I heard voices, but not the ones I expected. Police. Nobody move. The cavalry had arrived. The next few minutes were chaos. Through my barely cracked eyes, I watched police officers flood into my room and the hallway beyond. Gerald was shouting something about this being a misunderstanding, while Dr. Patterson was demanding to see warrants and threatening lawsuits. Detective Rodriguez, a stern-looking Latina woman in her 40s, approached my bed. She'd been the one Denise had contacted, and her face was grim with professional anger. Mrs. Crawford, can you hear me? I opened my eyes fully for the first time in days, no longer needing to pretend to be unconscious. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than it had been since this nightmare started. We got your friend's message and the blood samples. We know what they've been doing to you. Behind her, I could see Gerald in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. He was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. I was supposed to be dead by now. You recorded everything? I asked Detective Rodriguez. Your friend Denise is a smart woman. She not only got the police involved but also contacted a federal investigator she knew from her law office. Turns out Gerald and Dr. Patterson have been doing this for years, targeting women with substantial life insurance policies. My heart sank. How many others? At least 6 that we know of so far. All black women, all married to Gerald at different times under different names. He'd marry them, convince them to increase their life insurance, then work with Dr. Patterson to slowly poison them with medications that would cause organ failure. 6 other women. 6 other wives who trusted Gerald with their lives and their love, only to be murdered for money. I felt sick thinking about it. But why didn't anyone catch on before now? Detective Rodriguez pulled up a chair. He was smart about it. Different cities, different identities, different doctors until he partnered with Patterson 3 years ago. The deaths looked natural, and he was always the grieving widower who moved away to start fresh after collecting the insurance. Gerald was screaming now as they led him out of the room. She's lying. She's crazy. You can't prove anything. Dr. Patterson was quieter but just as angry. He kept demanding his lawyer and insisting that he was treating me according to proper medical protocols. The blood work tells a different story, Detective Rodriguez said. Jerome, who, by the way, is actually an undercover federal agent, found traces of several medications in your system that should never be used together. In the amounts they were giving you, they would have caused complete organ failure within hours. A federal agent. No wonder he'd known exactly what to do. How long have you known? I asked. We've been tracking Gerald for 8 months, but we needed proof. When your friend called about the insurance policy and mentioned the pattern of behavior, everything clicked into place. Denise appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. Simone. Oh my God, you're alive. She rushed to my bedside and grabbed my hand. I'm so sorry I couldn't get here sooner. When I got your message, I knew something was terribly wrong, but I had to be careful not to tip them off. You saved my life, I said, squeezing her hand back. No, girl. You saved your own life. That recording you made, the evidence you collected, that's what made the case solid. Over the next few hours, as the immediate crisis passed, I learned the full scope of what Gerald and Dr. Patterson had been doing. Gerald's real name was Michael Thompson, and he'd been married 7 times under various identities. 6 of his previous wives had died of natural causes within 2 years of their marriages, each one leaving him substantial insurance payouts. Dr. Patterson had been his partner for the last 3 years, providing the medical cover needed to make the deaths look legitimate. They'd chosen their victims carefully, successful black women with good insurance policies and relatively small social circles, women who trusted their husbands and doctors without question. The saddest part, Detective Rodriguez told me later, is that most of these women were isolated from their families or friends by the time they died. Gerald was good at cutting them off from their support systems, making them dependent on him. That explained why he'd been so encouraging about my catering business in the beginning, then gradually more critical and demanding. He'd wanted me focused entirely on him and our marriage, with no outside relationships that might notice if something seemed wrong. But Gerald had underestimated 2 things: my grandmother's stubborn strength that ran in my blood, and the bonds of friendship I'd maintained with women like Denise despite his subtle attempts to drive wedges between us. The medical team worked quickly to flush the poisons from my system. It would take weeks to fully recover, but the doctors assured me that I would make a complete recovery. My heart, liver, and kidneys had been damaged but not destroyed. You're lucky you figured out what was happening when you did, Dr. Williams, my new physician, told me. Another day or 2, and the damage might have been irreversible. 3 days later, I was strong enough to give a full statement to the police and federal investigators. The case against Gerald and Dr. Patterson was solid. They had the evidence from my blood work, my recorded conversations, financial records showing the pattern of marriages and insurance claims, and testimony from hospital staff who'd noticed unusual behavior. Brenda, it turned out, had been keeping notes about Gerald's visits and Dr. Patterson's treatment decisions. Her nursing experience had told her something was wrong, and she'd documented everything carefully. 40 years of nursing, she told me as I prepared to leave the hospital. You learn to trust your instincts about people. That man never looked at you like a husband should look at his wife. He looked at you like an investment. The media attention was intense once the story broke. Black widow hunter caught, and serial killer doctor exposed screamed from newspaper headlines. It was overwhelming, but I also knew it was important. Other women needed to know about men like Gerald, about the warning signs they'd missed. I did one interview with a local news station, where I talked about trusting your instincts and maintaining connections with friends and family even when your partner tries to isolate you. If someone truly loves you, I said to the camera, they want you to have a full life with many people who care about you. If they're trying to cut you off from everyone else, that's a red flag you shouldn't ignore. The legal process took months. Gerald, Michael Thompson, was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 6 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Dr. Patterson received 25 years for his role in the scheme. During the trial, I had to face both of them again. Gerald stared at me with pure hatred, furious that his perfect plan had been ruined by what he saw as a weak woman who should have died quietly. Dr. Patterson looked ashamed, but only because he'd been caught. The families of Gerald's other victims were there too. Sisters, mothers, friends who'd known something was wrong but hadn't been able to prove it. We sat together in the courtroom, a group of women united by loss and the determination to see justice done. When the verdicts were read, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began: peace. It wasn't over. I'd still have to deal with the trauma, the betrayal, the knowledge that someone I'd loved had tried to kill me. But justice had been served. After the trial, I sold the house Gerald and I had shared. I couldn't bear to live there, knowing he'd planned my death in those rooms where we'd once talked about our future together. Instead, I moved back to my grandmother's old house, the one I'd inherited and that had made me such an attractive target. The house felt different now, filled with memories of strength rather than pain. I could almost feel my grandmother's presence there, approving of how I'd fought back against the forces that had tried to destroy me. 6 months after the trial, I was finally ready to start living again instead of just surviving. The insurance money Gerald had planned to collect, $2 million that should have been his reward for murdering me, became the foundation for something beautiful instead. I used it to start the Mama Rose Foundation, named after my grandmother. The foundation's mission was to help women recognize the signs of abusive relationships and provide resources for those trying to escape dangerous situations. We also funded legal aid for women going through divorces from controlling partners. Denise left her job at the law firm to become the foundation's executive director. She'd always been passionate about women's rights, and seeing what I'd gone through had convinced her to dedicate her career to helping others in similar situations. "You know what the best part of this job is?" she told me one day as we worked in our new office. "Every woman we help is another victory over men like Gerald." The office was in a converted house in the historic Black district of our city. It felt right to be there, surrounded by the legacy of strong women who'd fought their own battles against oppression and violence. We had counselors, lawyers, and social workers on staff, all dedicated to helping women take control of their own lives. One of our first major successes was Sandra, a 35-year-old teacher whose husband had been slowly isolating her from her family and friends. He'd convinced her to quit her job, move across the country from her support system, and become completely financially dependent on him. When she finally reached out to us, she was afraid to leave because she had nowhere to go and no money of her own. The foundation helped her find a job in our city, provided temporary housing, and connected her with a lawyer who helped her file for divorce and protect her assets. 6 months later, Sandra was teaching again, living in her own apartment, and rebuilding relationships with the family she'd been cut off from. "You gave me my life back," she told me at a foundation fundraiser. "I was disappearing a little bit every day and I didn't even realize it was happening." Stories like Sandra's kept me motivated during the hard days when the memories of my own experience felt overwhelming. I still had nightmares sometimes, still felt a chill when I saw men who reminded me of Gerald. But therapy helped, and so did the knowledge that my survival was helping other women survive too. A year after the foundation opened, we got an unexpected visitor. Agent Jerome Walker, the man who'd posed as a lab tech to help gather evidence, stopped by our office in his real capacity as a federal investigator. "I wanted to update you on something," he said, settling into a chair across from my desk. "We've been working with other law enforcement agencies to identify more of Gerald's victims." My heart sank. More women? We found evidence of at least 3 more marriages before the 6 we knew about. But here's the thing, one of them is still alive. I stared at him in shock. "What do you mean?" "Her name is Patricia Moore. She was married to Gerald 12 years ago under the name David Williams. She supposedly died in a car accident, but we could never find a body or a death certificate that checked out. Now we think she might have escaped." The possibility that another woman had survived Gerald's plans filled me with hope and curiosity. How had she gotten away? Where was she now? "We're trying to locate her," Jerome continued. "If she's alive, her testimony could help us close some cold cases and maybe prevent other men from using similar methods." 2 weeks later, Jerome called with news. They'd found Patricia Moore, now Patricia Santiago, living in a small town in New Mexico under a new identity. She'd been working as a nurse's aide and had stayed hidden for over a decade, terrified that Gerald would find her. When they told her Gerald was in prison, she broke down crying. Then she agreed to come forward and tell her story. Patricia's experience had been almost identical to mine, except she'd figured out what was happening even earlier. Gerald had been less experienced then, more careless. She'd overheard him talking to someone on the phone about insurance money and had managed to fake her own death in a staged car accident before disappearing. "I've been looking over my shoulder for 12 years, she told me when we finally met in person. "I never remarried, never had children, never felt safe enough to build a real life. But knowing he's locked up forever, it's like I can finally breathe again." Patricia joined the foundation as a counselor, specializing in helping women who needed to start over with new identities. Her experience with creating a new life from nothing was invaluable to women escaping the most dangerous situations. Working with Patricia, I realized how lucky I'd been to have friends like Denise and healthcare workers like Brenda who believed me and acted quickly. Many women in abusive relationships don't have those support systems, or they're too afraid to reach out for help. We started a program called Safe Signals, a discreet way for women to communicate that they were in danger. Working with hospitals, banks, and other service providers, we trained staff to recognize subtle signs that someone might need help but couldn't ask for it directly. The program saved its first life 6 months after we launched it. A woman came into a bank to update her life insurance beneficiary, but when she filled out the paperwork, she wrote "Help me" in tiny letters in the margin. The bank teller, who'd been trained in our program, discreetly contacted social services. It turned out the woman's husband had been threatening to kill her if she ever tried to leave him, and she was trying to make sure her children would be provided for if something happened to her. Instead of waiting for tragedy, we were able to help her and her children escape to safety. 3 years after Gerald's arrest, the foundation had helped over 500 women escape dangerous relationships or recognize warning signs before it was too late. We'd expanded to 3 cities and were planning to open offices in 5 more. More importantly, the conversation around domestic violence and financial abuse had changed. People were more aware of the tactics men like Gerald used, more willing to believe women who said they were in danger. I still thought about Gerald sometimes, wondered if he lay awake in his prison cell regretting what he'd done. But mostly I thought about the future, about all the women who would live because we'd learned to recognize and fight back against predators like him. On the 4th anniversary of my hospitalization, I visited my grandmother's grave. I brought fresh flowers and a photo of the latest group of women who'd graduated from our empowerment program, 25 women who'd learned to recognize their own strength and value. "Look what we built, Grandmama," I said, placing the photo against her headstone. "All these women learning to stand up for themselves just like you taught me." The wind rustled through the oak trees around the cemetery, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice. "That's my girl. That's my strong girl." I was strong. I'd proven that by surviving Gerald's attempt to kill me, by fighting back when I had every reason to give up, by turning my trauma into something that helped other people. But I was also ready to be something more than just a survivor. 4 years after Gerald tried to kill me, I was finally ready to believe in love again. Not the desperate, consuming kind that had blinded me to his true nature, but something deeper and more honest. The kind of love my grandmother had described, built on respect, trust, and seeing someone clearly for who they really are. His name was Marcus, and we met at the most unlikely place, a support group for trauma survivors. He was there because his sister had been murdered by her boyfriend 3 years earlier, and he was still struggling with guilt over not recognizing the warning signs in time. I almost didn't go to that first meeting. After years of helping other women, I'd convinced myself I didn't need help processing my own experience. But Denise had insisted, practically dragging me there herself. "You can't pour from an empty cup forever," she told me. "You've been so focused on saving everyone else that you forgot to save yourself." Marcus was quiet during that first session, listening more than talking. When he did speak, it was with a gentleness that seemed to come from deep understanding of pain. He had kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. Later, I learned he was a carpenter who specialized in building homes for low-income families. After the meeting, we walked to the parking lot together, making small talk about the weather and traffic. It was only when I reached my car that he said something that stopped me in my tracks. "I read about your case in the papers," he said. "What you did, fighting back, building something good from something terrible, it gives me hope that maybe I can do something meaningful with my anger too." We started having coffee after the weekly meetings, then occasional dinners. Marcus never pushed for more than I was comfortable with, never made me feel like I owed him anything. He listened when I needed to talk about the nightmares or the days when trusting anyone felt impossible. He shared his own struggles with guilt and rage over his sister's death. "The hardest part," he told me one evening as we sat on my front porch, "is knowing that Keisha tried to tell me she was scared. But I thought she was being dramatic. I thought love was supposed to be passionate and intense." I understood that guilt. How many signs had I missed with Gerald? How many red flags had I explained away because I thought that's what love looked like? "We can't change what we didn't know then," I said. "But we can use what we know now to help other people." That's when Marcus told me about his idea. He wanted to create a program teaching young men about healthy relationships, about recognizing and interrupting patterns of abuse. Not just telling them that violence was wrong, but showing them what respect and partnership actually looked like. "Men like your ex-husband and my sister's killer," he said, They're created by a culture that teaches boys that love means possession and control. If we can reach young men before those ideas take root. I felt something spark in my chest. Not just attraction to Marcus, but excitement about the possibility of expanding our work. The foundation had focused primarily on helping women recognize and escape abuse, but preventing abuse meant working with potential perpetrators too. 6 months later, we launched the Real Men program as part of the Mama Rose Foundation. Marcus led workshops in high schools and community centers, teaching teenage boys about consent, communication, and emotional intelligence. The program covered everything from recognizing manipulation tactics to understanding that a partner's success should be celebrated, not feared. The first workshop had 12 participants. Within a year, we were running programs in 15 schools across 3 cities, reaching over 300 young men annually. One of our early success stories was Tyrone, a 17-year-old who came to the program after getting in trouble for harassing his ex-girlfriend when she broke up with him. He was angry and defensive at first, insisting that he was just trying to win her back, because he loved her. Love doesn't chase someone who doesn't want to be caught, Marcus told him during one session. Love respects someone's right to choose, even when that choice hurts. It took months, but gradually Tyrone began to understand the difference between love and possession. He wrote a letter apologizing to his ex-girlfriend, not asking for another chance, but acknowledging that his behavior had been wrong and promising to leave her alone. A year later, Tyrone became a peer educator in the program, helping other young men work through their own misconceptions about relationships. As the foundation grew, so did my relationship with Marcus. We moved slowly, building trust alongside affection. When he finally told me he loved me, it was after I'd had a particularly bad day dealing with legal paperwork related to Gerald's case. "I love how strong you are," he said, holding me as I cried from frustration and exhaustion. "But more than that, I love that you let yourself be vulnerable too. You don't have to be strong every minute of every day." It was exactly what I needed to hear. With Gerald, I felt like I had to be perfect all the time, successful, beautiful, agreeable. With Marcus, I could be human. We were married 2 years later in my grandmother's backyard, surrounded by the women from the foundation, Marcus's family, and the community we'd built together. Denise was my maid of honor, and Patricia walked me down the aisle since my grandmother wasn't there to do it. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Instead of traditional vows, we each spoke about the lessons we'd learned from our past experiences and how we planned to honor each other's autonomy and growth. "I promise to celebrate your successes without feeling threatened," Marcus said. "I promise to support your dreams even when they take you away from me. And I promise to trust you to make your own choices, even when I disagree with them. I promise to believe you when you tell me how you feel," I said. "I promise to speak up when something bothers me instead of hoping you'll just figure it out. And I promise to build a life with you, not lose myself in you." Our wedding night was spent not in some exotic location, but in our shared home, talking about our plans for the foundation and dreaming about the family we wanted to create together. We'd both been honest about wanting children, but we also knew the importance of timing. The foundation needed to be stable enough to run without my constant oversight before I could focus on pregnancy and early motherhood. That stability came sooner than expected. 3 years after our marriage, we had a solid board of directors, sustainable funding from multiple sources, and a staff of 35 people across 6 cities. Denise had grown into her role as executive director, and Patricia was running our counselor training program. When I told Marcus I was ready to start trying for a baby, his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "I want to bring children into a world where we're actively fighting to make things better. That feels right." It took 6 months, but eventually I was pregnant with our daughter. The pregnancy was healthy and uncomplicated, so different from the fear and uncertainty I'd experienced in the hospital with Gerald's poison in my system. We named her Rose after my grandmother. When she was born, perfectly healthy and screaming with indignation at being removed from her warm hiding place, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. Holding my daughter for the first time, I thought about all the women the foundation had helped, all the children who would grow up in safer homes because their mothers had learned to recognize their own worth. Rose would grow up knowing that love meant respect, that partnership meant equality, that her voice mattered. Marcus was an incredible father from day one. He took paternity leave to help with the newborn stage, changed diapers without complaint, and got up for night feedings without being asked. More importantly, he talked to Rose constantly, telling her about his day, reading her books, singing silly songs. "I want her to know from the beginning that men can be nurturing and present," he told me. I want her to expect that from any man who wants to be in her life. When Rose was 6 months old, we had a celebration at the foundation. Not just for her but for a milestone we'd reached, our 1,000th successful case. 1,000 women who'd escaped dangerous relationships, recognized warning signs, or simply learned to value themselves more highly. The celebration was held in the community center we'd built next to our main office. Women who'd been helped by the foundation came with their children, their new partners, their dreams rebuilt. There were success stories everywhere you looked. Sandra, the teacher who'd been isolated by her controlling husband, had remarried a man who encouraged her to pursue a master's degree in education. She was now running her own tutoring program for at-risk kids. Patricia had found love too, with a gentle man who knew her whole story and admired her strength. They were planning to adopt children who'd been removed from abusive homes. Even Brenda was there, retired from nursing but volunteering at the foundation's crisis hotline. She held baby Rose while I gave a speech about how far we'd all come. 5 years ago, I told the crowd, I was lying in a hospital bed thinking my life was over. A man I trusted had decided I was worth more dead than alive, and I almost believed him. But this community of women taught me something my grandmother always knew. We're stronger together than any of us could be alone. I looked around the room at all the faces, women who'd survived, women who were still fighting, women who were helping others fight. This was my real family, the one I'd chosen and built through shared struggle and mutual support. We've helped 1,000 women so far, I continued, but our work isn't finished. As long as there are men who think they own the women they claim to love, as long as there are systems that make it hard for women to leave dangerous situations, we'll be here. The applause was thunderous, but what moved me most were the individual conversations afterward. Women telling me about new jobs, new relationships, children who were thriving in stable homes. Dreams that had been put on hold were finally being pursued. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Marcus and I sat in our living room with baby Rose sleeping between us. The house was quiet except for the soft sounds of her breathing and the distant hum of traffic. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if Gerald had succeeded? Marcus asked. I considered the question. It wasn't something I liked to dwell on, but it was worth examining. Sometimes, I said, but not with sadness anymore. I think about all the women who wouldn't have been helped, all the programs that wouldn't exist. In a weird way, surviving his attempt to kill me gave my life more purpose than it ever had before. Marcus reached over and took my hand. I'm grateful he failed. Not just because I got to meet you, but because the world is better with you in it. Looking down at our daughter, I felt the weight of responsibility and hope in equal measure. Rose would grow up in a world where women like her mother ran foundations and changed laws and refused to be silenced. She would also grow up knowing that some people might try to hurt her simply because she was female, successful, or independent. But she'd have tools we didn't have. She'd have language for manipulation and abuse. She'd have a community of people committed to her safety and success. Most importantly, she'd know from birth that her life had value that couldn't be measured in dollars or possessions. As I watched my daughter sleep, I made her a silent promise. I would continue fighting to make the world safer for her and for all the daughters who would come after us. The foundation would grow, the programs would expand, and the conversation about women's safety would continue to evolve. Gerald had tried to end my story in a hospital bed, but instead he'd given me the beginning of something much larger than either of us could have imagined. My life had become proof that survival was just the first step. The real victory was in thriving, in building something beautiful from something terrible, in making sure that my grandmother's strength lived on in me and would live on in my daughter. Outside our window, the city hummed with life, thousands of people pursuing their dreams, building families, creating communities. Somewhere out there, women were making the choice to leave dangerous relationships. Men were learning to love without possessing, children were growing up safe and valued. The work would continue. The foundation would outlast me, just as my grandmother's legacy had outlasted her. And someday maybe Rose would carry it forward too, adding her own strength to the long line of women who refused to be silenced. For now, though, it was enough to sit in this peaceful room with the two people I loved most, knowing that we'd all live to see another day, another chance to make things better. Gerald had been wrong about everything, but especially about this. I was worth so much more alive than I ever could have been dead.